Welcome to this lecture on constitutions and legal system of East Africa. Today we are going to see on the part 2 of this course, where we are going to discuss on the 3 knowledge areas, 4, 5, and 6. So far as knowledge area 4 is concerned, we are going to discuss on the development of Zanzibar Constitution of 1984. Knowledge area 5 will deal with the court system and conflict of laws. And last but not least is the knowledge area 6, where we are going to see the development of court systems since 1961. Let's start with the development of Zanzibar constitutions of 1984. We are told that Zanzibar has been under the foreign domination for quite some time, for more than 100 years. It was under the domination of Arabs and Britain. So in this lecture, we are going to examine or to see on how the constitution developed during the period, the colonial period, up to the mid of 1950s. So it went through different phases. We have 3 phases. The first phase is of 1832, whereby the Sultan Said shifted his place from Oman to Zanzibar. He did so in order to get a tight control of political and economic development. The second phase is of 1890, where Zanzibar was placed under the British protection. And the last but not least is the third phase, where we observe this in 1950s, where the struggle for independence began. Let's see the situation, how the situation was under the Sultan occupation. Why Sultan occupied Zanzibar? The history says this was doing so, or it was done for 2 various reasons. One of the reasons was that Zanzibar was taken to be an important route to the Spice Islands of the Far East. Another important reason for the Sultan occupation in Zanzibar, it was considered to be the strategic importance in the penetration and occupation of the mainland of Africa. So these are the main 2 reasons for the Sultan occupation in Zanzibar. We are also told that it was at this time when Britain and France were struggling for control of the Indian Ocean, and both powers knew that the control of the Muscat would be of strategic importance. Again, Oman sultans had a friendship agreement with both France and Britain. But the imperialist rival was turning more and more in favor of Britain. This being the case, Said allied more and more with the British. So according to this alliance of the Sultan Said with the Britain, it helped him to both pacify his internal opponents and also to withstand the external pressure from the Jawasni, pirates, and Wahhabis. It is said further that with the establishment of Oman colonial state in Zanzibar, Zanzibar became the center for trade for Eastern Africa. And the most common trade during this period was slave trade. It was estimated in 1930s about 2,500 slaves were sent to Persian Gulf annually, while the reunion took at least 100,000 slaves to work on the sugar plantations. So the role of slaves trade in Zanzibar economy could not be underestimated. Slaves were not only exported but also used by Arabs, feudal classes, both for domestic and cultural works. So we are further told that in a matter of several decades, there emerged landed of Arab aristocrats on one hand and landless. So this, I could say that this was one of the disadvantages of this slave trade, whereby the landless Africans was forced to quit and work on the Arab plantations, as I've said earlier. So, as this goes by, the legal status of the Sultan of Zanzibar as autonomous monarch and also confirmed his exclusive claim to sovereignty over Zanzibar and other domination along East Africa coast. So when we discuss of the nature of the constitution, basically this was a slave constitution. A slave constitution. As long as the mode of production was founded on slavery. It later changed to a feudal constitution whereby the Arab landed aristocracy were compelled to live on cloth production after the abolition of slavery by Britain in 1975. So the slave trade was officially abolished in 1875. The political, social, and economic rights of slaves and serfs were similar to those found in slave and feudal societies. So, for non-indigenous people, especially Europeans, who at that particular time were in Zanzibar to do business, they were treated differently. Their business rights were safeguarded by commercial treaties signed by the Sultan. So we can see different treaties which were signed by the sultans to protect the Britons or the British, the European citizens who at that particular time were in Zanzibar for doing business. Each treaty at that particular point established a tribunal for adjudication of cases involving nationals of state which were part of that particular treaty. This being the case, Zanzibar courts could not arrest or try the citizens of these countries in the court established by Sultan of Zanzibar. So this was all done in order to protect the Europeans who were in Zanzibar for doing business. We can see from that point that these treaties were more of the protections of the non-indigenous people than the indigenous people who were the people of Zanzibar. So it is said further that the British Treaty, which was renewed in 1886, and the other treaties were later abrogated and the tribunals established there were abolished. So the Treaty of 1886 was extinguished by the Treaty of 1908. From this point, the consular courts were established. What do we mean when we say the consular courts? First of all, let's see the compilation of these consular courts. These courts were presided over by the consular officers. This was seen in 1891. The point of officers other than consular officer to preside over these courts were authorized by the Declaration of February 1891. Further, the Sultan of Zanzibar granted jurisdiction to a Great Britain by the jurisdiction of the British Court Decree of 1908. So this is simply the history on how the Zanzibar constitutions developed. By this decree, British courts had jurisdiction in Zanzibar and Pemba over subjects of His Britannic Majesty. The subjects and citizens of friendly powers whose consular tribunals had been closed in the subject of the Christian powers not represented by the consuls at Zanzibar. In a very briefly, the administration of justice during the Sultan's occupation was constitutionally discriminatory, as I've said earlier. It was more of favor over the British than the native people of Zanzibar. The Arab feudal lords and the convents in Islamic religion had their dispute adjudicated in the Sultan's court, while foreign nations from Western Europe had their grievances resolved by tribunals and courts established by treaties. As I've discussed previously, that these treaties were meant to protect the interests of those Europeans who were in Zanzibar at that particular time doing different kind of business. So they decided to enter into different treaties in order to protect their own interests. However, the position changed in 1908, where Britain assumed the task of hearing all cases involving European nationals in her court. Let's see briefly Zanzibar under the Sultan and Zanzibar under the British occupation. After the death of the Sultan Said in 1856, we are told that Britain became involved in the political affairs of the royal family. And the role of the Britons was guarantor and sponsor of the Sultanate, which gave extraordinary power over the Sultan and his government. Thus, in the year 1873, the Sultanates coerced and promulgated decrees forbidding together the sale and transportation of slaves in his dominions. So that was 1873. As we have seen previously, that by 1875, the slave trade business was officially abolished. So this was a movement by the Britain. So this being the case, the British became or had a direct, not only a direct, they had power over the Zanzibar domestic affairs, since it radically alienated the Sultan's followers. And this being the case, there came a Great Britain. It was the Sultan's followers and let's say the people of Zanzibar were forced to rely completely on the Great Britain for protection. By 1890, Zanzibar was made a British protectorate by a treaty which was guaranteed by the Sultan and his successors the throne of Zanzibar. Let's see on the formation of an Arab state. Practically, Zanzibar was the colony of Britain. However, the British themselves did not intend to develop Zanzibar as a colony by saving the interests of the indigenous Zanzibarians. British wanted Zanzibar as a Muslim state. This strategy was upheld to the last days of its colonial presence. So, this situation was, however, contrary to many areas around the place where African majorities were coming into powers. So, this being the case, the British I would say, this situation led to the Zanzibar Revolution of 1964. Let's see on the Zanzibar Constitution order. In Zanzibar, there was the existence of the British jurisdiction. The ISOs was secured by the passage from time to time of orders in council by His Majesty. They were first issued under the Foreign Jurisdiction Act of 1843 to 1878. And later, we had the Foreign Jurisdiction Act of 1890. We are also aware of the Order in Council, Zanzibar Order in Council, which comprises of all the constitutional documents for Zanzibar, as well as the instrument which legalized British occupation of Zanzibar. This is one of the very important documents in the history of Zanzibar Constitution. You can see very briefly on the judicial structure. But remember, we are tracing the development of Zanzibar Constitution of 1984. So, among other things, we are supposed to see the judicial structure of that particular time. The Order in Council provided for establishment of the court system by virtue of its Article 7 of Zanzibar Order in Council, as I've said earlier, of 1897. This court, however, later was transformed into the High Court of Zanzibar, and appeals from decree of His Britannic Majesty Court were laid before this court. At this particular time, Zanzibar was deemed to be a district of the High Court of India at Bombay. So appeals to the Privy Council in Britain. Let's see the Constitution Order of 1914. Many changes on the constitutions were taken in 1914, and these were necessitated by the Britain's decision to convert Zanzibar Protectorate into a purely colony. Although, when we use the word protectorate, the word protectorate was never dropped. because they pretended that they were protecting Zanzibar, but the intention was to put Zanzibar purely as a Britain colony. So despite the changes that took place in 1944, but still under circumstance, the word protectorate was seen. So the Britain transferred their control over Zanzibar affairs from Foreign Office, as it was before, to the Colonial Office, just like with other colonies. So the Zanzibar affairs from that particular time were being dealt with the colonial offices. In 1914, we see the emergence of Zanzibar Order in Council. This is one of the very important documents insofar as the development of the Constitution of Zanzibar is concerned. This was enacted to sustain many changes. Its enactment had several consequences in repealing the previous Zanzibar Order in Council, which was of 1906. In its Article 7, the order established the office of the High Commission for Zanzibar Protectorate. He was to be appointed by His Majesty. So we can see still the British went on controlling some of the areas. And from that particular article, we can see the function of that commissioner who was appointed by the king. Below the High Court of Zanzibar, there was subordinate courts which could be established by the High Commissioner. This is seen under Article 22, Sub-Article 1 of the Council, Order in Council of 1914. The High Commission in January 1917 proceeded to establish the following subordinate courts. So other subordinate courts were established, as this was one of the functions of the High Commission. So he established the Magistrate Court for each of the Zanzibar Island, District Commission Courts for Pemba, and District Commissioners Court for each of the districts. For example, Mwera, Chwapa, and Mpokotini in Zanzibar. So all these subordinate courts were established by the High Commissioner, who was by then appointed by His Majesty the King. So Zanzibar Order in Council of 1914 was somehow silenced on the establishment of the legislative organ to establish a protectorate council consisting of His Highness the Sultan as the president, the British resident as vice president, and 3 other officials, and 4 representatives of the Arabs and Persian community. From this point, you can see there were no representatives of African community. So the council was purely an advisory organ. The main function of this particular council was only to give an advice to the Sultan and senior British officials. So they could not make any decision. Let's see the introduction of Zanzibar Order in Council of 1924. As we have seen previously, this order in council were being amended. I would say they were enacted time to time in order to see on how to cure some of the gaps which existed in different
anza tu hapo juu. Ila unatumia muda mwingi.
Dakika zimeisha
10. Wakati unaenda nusu saa.
Hamna.
Serious?
Okay, let's see. Let's see the Zanzibar Order in Council of 1924. So this was also enacted to cater the constitutional changes. Under this Order in Council, the High Commission was established and the Governor of Kenya ceased to be the High Commissioner for Zanzibar. We also had Zanzibar Order in Council in 1926. Many constitution changes were effected in this Council of 1926. So under this Order in Council, we see that the order provided for the establishment of the Legislative Council, whereby the council presided over by the British representative consisted of 4 ex-official members, 5 official members, and 6 unofficial members, whose function was simply to represent the various communities of the Iceland. You can go through Article 2 of the order. Let's see briefly on the weakness of the Legislative Council, which was formed by the Order in Council of 1926. The major weakness here was unequal treatment of communities. So this was the major weakness of this particular council. Unequal treatment, I would say unequal treatment between the communal, the native citizens vis-a-vis the Arabs or the Europeans, the non-indigenous and the indigenous people. How constitution was then set up. This development could be observed from the 1950s to 1963, whereby Zanzibar was achieving its independence. So it can be viewed in 3 phases. The first phase came in 1957, where constitution changes were effected to allow election of half of 12 unofficial members of the Legislature Council through direct election. And the second phase was seen in 1961, where locally elected representatives were allowed to constitute a legislative majority. And the third phase was seen in 1963, where Zanzibar entered the last phase of colonial status. So these were the 3 phases where the constitutional setup would be observed. Let's see on the Constitution Decree of 1963. This change occurred to back up with the passage of the Constitutional Decree of 1963. This decree provided for the government of Zanzibar protectorate during the transitional stage to independence. However, this decree was enacted by Highness the Sultan. It came into force 1963, provided for the establishment of the Privy Council, Cabinet of Ministers, as well as National Assembly. So this was the transition period towards independence. You see on the National Assembly, this was established by Section 43 of the decree. You can see on the qualification of the people of that National Assembly. We also have the constitution development in Zanzibar, 1964 to 1984. So since Zanzibar got its independence in 1963, it has undergone through major constitution changes. Second change was in 1979, where the first post-revolution constitution was promulgated. Under this situation, the changes attempted to establish the democratic institutions which were abolished. The revolution and the constitution order. Zanzibar revolution was successful, carried out 1964, which resulted into the replacement of the elected government by revolutionary government of Zanzibar. Under Section 2 of the decree, it provided for the division of power among the three organs of the state. So we can observe, here we observe one of the important constitutional principles which was discussing on the division of power among the three organs of the state. Zanzibar Constitution of 1979. Well, this was one of the first post-revolution constitution which was enacted between 5th and 12th of October 1979 by the Revolutionary Council of Zanzibar. So by the enactment of this decree of 1964, we can therefore argue that this decree comprises the Constitution of Zanzibar at a very material time. Let's briefly see the Zanzibar Constitution of 1984. This was enacted, the current Zanzibar Constitution was officially enacted in 1984. It is also in this very year, 1984, whereby the Bill of Rights was for the first time incorporated in the Constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania. So, Zanzibar Constitution, as I've said, was officially enacted in 1984. So, having gone through all the history of the development of Zanzibar Constitution from the time of the colonial period up to the time of independence, this is all comprises on how Zanzibar Constitution of 1984 came into place. Thank you.